Welcome back to the Holistic Health Bites podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit different topic. We're going to talk a lot about Ayurveda, and I am joined by Meghna, who's going to tell us all about this practice and how, beneficial it can be, how it's different than some other modalities, and a lot about also how we can use this for better skin. So welcome, Meghna. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your story, your background, how you got into Ayurveda, and just a little bit about it in general?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started off my career as a pharmacist. So I've worked in a hospital pharmacy. So I've seen many different types of patients. And after a while, I kind of got a bit stuck because I felt like we're all about treating, once a problem has arisen or once a diagnosis has been made, like we know how to treat, but we don't really know much about prevention. So it really made me like seek further into like different alternative treatments. And I had a few people that I've heard of that had been treated Ayurvedically, like they had IBS, and they were on medicines and they had, some Ayurvedic treatment and they were no longer on their medicines. So for me, like with a kind of scientific background, I wanted to learn a bit more about that. I was like, oh wow, how can this Ayurvedic medicine work? And it's also like originated in the East, and I'm Indian by background. So, as a child, we might hear like, oh, take this turmeric or take something. And again, I've always wanted to know, like, okay, how does that work? Like, we're always taking Western medicines, but like, why does the other things work as well? So yeah, then I came across Ayurveda and I wanted to learn about it. So I joined a course here in London. And yeah, since then I've just never regretted it, and I've seen it help so many people. So it's something that I'm really interested in now.
Oh, it's so fascinating. I just love hearing how people, stumble upon these different things and solve their problems. I think there's a million different ways that we can get to the same goal as long as we're doing it in a natural, healthy way. I think it's amazing. And I love that there's so many different practices that people can, get behind. And I love how you found Ayurveda. And I would love for you to just kind of discuss maybe how it's different than other modalities, whether that be conventional, like pharmaceutical side of things, or just other even holistic practices. What makes Ayurveda different?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of comparing it to Western medicine, to be honest, I'm not sure about a lot of other modalities, mainly just Ayurveda and like Western medicine. But in terms of like Western medicine, I feel like Western medicine tends to look at each organ as an individual, or like each, body system as an individual. So it might look at the heart. If you've got anxiety or depression, you might go to like a psychiatrist. If you've got stomach problems, you might go to a gastroenterologist. Um, but it doesn't really look at the body as a whole. Like it doesn't understand the link between the constipation and the anxiety, for example. Whereas Ayurveda looks at the body as a whole. Um, and that's because it looks at something that we call doshas. So it's different energy types. So Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So Vata is kind of related to air and ether. Kapha is related to earth, so anything kind of grounding, and Pitta is related to fire. So we do have all of these within us, and that's kind of how Ayurveda can link the two. So like you might have a Pitta imbalance at one place in your body, but then also another place, and that's how it knows that they're both related to heat, rather than looking at just the heart, just the stomach. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so when it comes to once you've identified what that imbalance is, are most of the kind of treatments or recommendations then like herbal, as well as I know there's a lot of lifestyle stuff as well, like you mentioned grounding and some of those things. Is it kind of that herbal and like lifestyle stuff, or what might a treatment look like in Ayurveda?
Yeah, so there's like a range of things, and it does include herbal medication. So herbal medication, a few things like ashwagandha, which is a common Ayurvedic herb, triphala, dhatri, they all work in different ways. So herbal medication will be one kind of treatment part of it. Another part is like lifestyle factors as well, because certain things can aggravate one of these doshas. So, for example, stress or heavy exercise can aggravate the pitta and the fire dosha. So we would look at a person's lifestyle and kind of see what the imbalance is and then find the solution to bring that balance down. So for example, someone with high fire or high pitta, if they're exercising heavily, I might be like, okay, cut back on your heavy exercise and maybe do some lighter, yoga or gentle walking, or just something a bit more gentle. And that should help bring the fire element down. um and going back to the other question, I guess that's another difference between this and Western medicine, because it's a bit more tailored to the individual. So it looks at what imbalances that individual has, rather than the standard, this is what everyone should do. Everyone should do 30 minutes of exercise that's vigorous. That might not be the advice for everyone. So it kind of is a bit more personalized and tailored to that individual.
Oh, that makes sense. And how is it that you figure out which of the doshas is imbalanced or where those imbalances are occurring?
Yeah, so this is where usually an Ayurvedic specialist can help diagnose that. But there are certain things, like we would look at your appetite. So do you have a variable appetite? Do you have a strong appetite? Do you have like a weak appetite, like you're not really hungry a lot of the time? So that helps us determine which one of the doshas are out of balance. Also, like your emotions, are you someone that's more angry or more like a bit more fearful, anxious? These ones, like fearful and anxiousness, is a bit more of the vata imbalance, whereas someone that's angry, jealous, aggressive, that's more like the pitta, fire emotions. So literally everything in life tends to fall in within the vata, pitta, or kapha. So looking at the person's, whole lifestyle, even what job they do, what, time they sleep, like all these factors can help determine what's out of balance. And sometimes it could be two, like it could be the air and the fire element that's out of balance. And obviously those ones are a bit more tricky to manage. And it's like trial and error as well. So like if you think the fire element is out of balance, you maybe give something cooling or like help reduce that fire. But then you might notice, oh, one of the other doshas are out of balance. So then it's about kind of managing like trial and error. So yeah, it can be quite complicated to figure out which dosha's out of balance.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be. I mean, you could probably have even some conflicting things where it's like, well, you need more of this that will make this one worse. And yeah, I can
Yeah,
see where that would get really complicated for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah. And also, a lot of people ask like, oh, what's my dosha? But it's not about knowing what your dosha is. It's about knowing what the imbalance is. Because the way I was taught it is that it's like you go to your doctor and say, what's my healthy body? But you only show them what's unhealthy. Once they take away the unhealthiness, then you can get to your true healthy person.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you
Yeah.
also apply a lot of this practice to skin health, like acne and those kinds of things. How does that work when it comes to, outward things like skin?
Yeah. So I actually had acne in around, I would say 2020, maybe like around 2019, 2020. Um, and so I used Ayurvedic principles myself, and I feel like that really helped. But in terms of how it kind of manifests in the body, a lot of it is stress related, and the pitta again being too high. But really, it all boils down to digestion. So sometimes some people say we are what we eat, but Ayurveda says we are what we digest, because we could be eating the healthiest foods, or what we think is healthy, but if our body's not digesting it, then rather than producing like good nutrition, our body's going to produce toxins, and those toxins circulate throughout your body. And in Ayurveda, there's something called dhatus, which kind of translates to tissues. So there's seven different tissues in the body, or like kind of organs or systems. So the first one is actually skin, which is in Ayurveda called rasa and rakta. The second one is rakta, which is like blood. Um, and those are the first two. So once you eat your food, either you produce nutrition or you produce toxins. Whichever one you produce, that circulates throughout the seven tissues. And the first two are related to skin. So that's why when you eat something unhealthy, or you've, had alcohol or something, you might see like spots, or at least one spot on your face soon after. And that's because it's got straight to that first level of your skin. Um, if you don't treat it at that stage, or if you just treat it topically, or just, without treating the root cause, the toxins could go deeper down. So the third level is like your bones. So it could start affecting your joints and you could get arthritis or joint pain or something. And that's another way that Ayurveda links one condition to another, because it looks at how deep into your tissues it's affected.
Oh, so interesting. And that makes a lot of sense because, yeah, the skin is often one of the first signs that you have some kind of imbalance or some kind of toxicity or infection or something going on. And I 100% agree with you on, and the whole practice of Ayurveda, that you are what you digest. If you can't properly digest it, you can't get the nutrients out of that food. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter how clean your diet is. If you're not properly breaking it down and absorbing those nutrients, they're not serving you any good. And yeah, they will just turn into toxins and pro-inflammatory compounds and things. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry, just a slight correction. I said bones is the third one, but it's actually rasa, which is plasma, rakta is blood, mansa, which is muscle, medus, which is fat, asti is your bone, majja, which is your bone marrow, and then shukra is your reproductive organs. So that's the order it goes in.
Interesting. So yeah, it really just goes deeper and deeper throughout the body. So that makes perfect sense. So tell me some of the things that you've seen in just people in general or people you've worked with that are like common mistakes people are making, that are taking either their doshas out of alignment, or that are just contributing to some of these systems getting out of whack. What are some of those things that people can maybe look at their own lives and go, oh yeah, I should probably stop that?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love this question. Okay. So, one of the things is not listening to your own body. So like, so by that I mean, like, when you're thirsty, we should be drinking. When you're hungry, you should be eating. And when you're tired, you should be resting. Sometimes we might be over drinking. We might think, oh my God, I need 2 to 3 liters of water a day. So we might just be drinking all the time. But that actually dampens our digestive fire. So like Ayurveda believes that your gut is like your digestive system, and it's like fire, digestive fire. So if you're drinking when you're not thirsty, or when you're hungry but you're having a coffee because you don't have time to eat, so you just want to drink a coffee, these kind of things are dampening your digestive fire. Especially water, like drinking loads of water when you're hungry is dampening your appetite. So really, when we're hungry, we should be eating, because our body needs food at that point. So we shouldn't really ignore our hunger. And I guess the opposite of that is we shouldn't eat when we're not hungry. Like if we're just emotionally eating, or like, we're just stressed, so we're eating. We should try and just tune into our body and see like, okay, am I actually hungry, or am I eating because I'm bored? So that would be one of the things. Another thing is there's been a lot about like eating raw foods. I've heard a lot about that in the past, but sometimes these things just become trends, but they're not actually healthy for us. So that would be one example, where again, because our digestive system is like a fire, ideally we should be eating cooked foods because it's less work for our body to digest. It's easier to digest because it's already cooked. Whereas if we're eating raw foods, it requires our appetite or our digestion to work a bit harder. So sometimes that's why we could get bloating after eating things like raw food. And especially for certain types like Vata, people that have a Vata imbalance, they should avoid raw foods more so than the others. Like people with Pitta imbalances might have a stronger digestion. So that's important. Also like living in alignment with nature. So what I mean by that is like we should be following kind of the sun. So when the sun rises, that's when we ideally should be waking up. If we wake up too late, like after 10 p.m. or something, 10 a.m., we might feel a bit sluggish throughout the day. So if you notice when you wake up around 6 a.m., obviously sun rises at different places at different times, but roughly around 6 a.m., you'd kind of feel more awake throughout the day, even though you've woken up earlier. And I guess in line with that, like when the sun rises, like when it's the highest in the sky at like 12 noon, our appetites and our digestive fire is usually the strongest at that point. So that's when we should try and eat a heavy meal, like at lunchtime. And then when it comes to dinner time, maybe have something a bit lighter, but also avoid eating too close to bedtime. So, ideally before around 7 p.m., at least like 3 hours before we should be going to sleep. Around 10 p.m. is usually a good time to sleep. And there's a whole kind of Ayurvedic clock, Ayurvedic body clock. And in different times of the day, there's different doshas that are most active, or the energy of that dosha is the highest. So from the morning between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is Vata time. So that's when the air element is high. Pitta time is between 10 and 2. And that's like overnight and lunchtime. And then Kapha time is between 6 and 10. So again, at these different times of day, we should be doing different things. So like I said, we should have our heaviest meal at Pitta time because that's when our digestive fire is the strongest. And I guess a few other examples is like Vata time is when our creativity is high. So if we want to do some creative tasks or, even if it's planning or something like creative, it's good to do it between Vata time because that's when our creativity is the highest. And I guess it all makes sense when you think of certain things, because like if you go to sleep past 10 o'clock, I don't know about everyone else, but sometimes I might get really hungry around 11, 12 o'clock. And I'm thinking like, why am I hungry? It's, bedtime. But it's because you're in the pitta stage again. Although it's the nighttime pitta stage, you're still in the pitta stage. And in this pitta stage, we don't just digest food, but we're digesting our emotions, our thoughts from the day. So also you might notice that if you sleep after 10 o'clock, your mind might be wandering a lot more when you're trying to get to sleep, especially like 11, 12-ish. Your mind is like on overdrive mode because that's when your body is digesting all your thoughts from the day. So yeah, that's quite a big topic in itself, but I guess living in alignment with the Ayurvedic body clock is important because it helps regulate things like your bowel movements, your emotions. So it kind of, keeps you a bit more balanced generally.
No, that's so interesting. I've never heard it quite referred to that way, that you're digesting your thoughts, but that makes perfect sense because, yeah, most of the people I work with that really struggle to get to bed at a reasonable time say that their mind is racing and they're snacking and they're drinking more and they're doing all these things that they don't want to be doing, but they feel like they can't go to bed yet because they're wide awake or they're working or they're doing some of these other things that really aren't in line with our circadian rhythms or the Ayurvedic body clock at all. And yeah, you're kind of starting your cycles at all the wrong times then and stimulating the wrong things. So that makes perfect sense. And I know that's also a lot of times if we look at even like gut microbes, we have really good gut microbes, but a lot of us also have some not so ideal microbes in bacteria and parasites and stuff. And they also become much more active at night. A lot of them, they're more nocturnal, and that contributes to this whole situation. We need to be sleeping so that the body can detoxify and repair and do all those things when nighttime comes around. So that is how we're designed. So really interesting.
Yeah.
Are there
Exactly.
other practices that people maybe believe that they're doing correctly, like they're doing the right things? Like you mentioned exercise earlier and over exercising or doing, too much or the wrong kinds or too intense. Are there other things kind of like that people are doing because they believe they're really healthy and ideal, but maybe you're not actually in line with, a good Ayurvedic practice?
Yeah. So a few things that come to my head when you say that is eating porridge in the morning. So we often think porridge is healthy, and it can be for some, but it can also be quite drying on the body. So for people with a Vata imbalance, so the air element, that could aggravate their condition. It can cause more bloating or constipation. So porridge is one that comes to my head, and also salad. So salad is also like kind of classed as raw foods because it's not cooked. But someone with a Vata imbalance might get bloating from salads. So again, someone with a Pitta imbalance might be better at digesting salad. So for them, it might be okay. And also the time of year that you're eating it. So in summer, it's more okay because it's more heat out there. So generally the Pitta is a bit higher. So I would say salads is another thing, especially in winter. I had another thought that just left my head. Oh yes, so bad, not I won't say bad, but like incompatible foods. So eating things together that should be avoided. And commonly things like fruit. So fruit is best eaten alone, so not with other foods. And that's because fruit digests a lot quicker than other foods do. So say you've just had a heavy meal and you're having a bit of fruit after your dinner. That's a common not recommended practice in Ayurveda because your body is still digesting the heavy meal that you just had. The fruits are sitting on top of your stomach waiting to be digested. But because your main meal is taking a while, that fruit, it starts fermenting in your body and it basically just causes toxins. So it's better to eat fruit on an empty stomach, or at least around 2 hours after a meal, so that at least some of your meal has digested and maybe all of it has digested, and then it's good to eat fruit then. So that's one thing. And also mixing fruit in with actual food, so like yogurt or something like that, it's not recommended. It's best to eat it on its own. And I guess in line with that, things like there's a few combinations that should be avoided. So dairy and like avocado. So even when we have avocado and eggs, for example, that's not a good combination. And milk should also not be eaten with fruits. I'm trying to think of some more. I feel like there's a few. Beans and cheese, I've also recently heard isn't a good combination, which I actually didn't realize myself about that one. But that's quite common in Mexican food, which I love. So it's a bit of a hard one to avoid. And even having like, I don't know if like you know, sometimes might put fruit in your salads, like grapes or strawberries in a salad. So that's also not really recommended because again, fruit should be kept separately. And another thing that comes to mind is smoothies. So I used to in the past before I studied Ayurveda, I used to have loads of smoothies, and I thought they were really healthy. But it's actually a lot for our body to digest. So if we are mixing lots of different fruits, and you know, sometimes we even put things like spinach or you know, some more vegetable-y type foods in a smoothie, and you know, blend it all together. Sometimes we might even mix milk or orange juice in some smoothies. So you know, imagine like the whole cocktail of things you're putting in that smoothie. And then if you think like you were going to eat all those fruits or vegetables not like mixed up in a smoothie, if you were just going to eat them, that would probably be a bad combination, or it'll be a lot for your stomach to handle. So I know we are crushing it. I mean, not crushing it, sorry. I know we're blending it, but it still sometimes can be too much for the body to digest. So again, those kind of things can cause bloating. So I think those are probably the most common like kind of food habits I've seen or I've learnt about that I used to think were healthy, but only after studying Ayurveda, I was like, they're not always recommended.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the, you know, individuality of things, because someone who also has like diabetes is going to have a huge blood sugar spike if they were to have fruit all by itself. So they actually probably would do better without the fruit at all. And
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
your point on the smoothies, yeah, it can be really hard on the digestive system, and it can also go through your system really quickly and be a big bomb all at once. Instead of, you know, if you had to actually break down the whole foods that you ate, it would take a lot longer, but you've kind of pre-digested some of it by blending it, and it reacts in your body completely differently than it would if you ate the individual components in their whole form. So there's so many components that go into this with, you know, other chronic conditions like diabetes or, you know, whatever other conditions you might have, but also what your goals are. You know, what are you trying to accomplish with this? Are you trying to reverse a disease? Are you trying to, you know, maximize some other benefit that you're getting from your food or your practices? There's so many factors that we need to take into account to decide what the best things are. But I think the whole food combination thing is a big topic of conversation for a lot of different reasons. And it really is something that we should be paying attention to and making sure that the foods we're combining really work well together and are in line with our goals and aren't actually sabotaging us secretly. So I think that's a really important topic.
Yeah, definitely. And
Are there,
it's important to just keep an eye, sorry to
no, you're
interrupt. It's
good.
important to keep an eye on how you're feeling. Like if you've had something, just notice your body. Like, do you get bloating? Do you, you know, feel anxious after you've eaten something? And just like really tune into yourself. And then you probably can start picking out things that might not suit you. Like it might suit your friend or someone else, but you know, everyone's individual. So it's good to try and notice what doesn't work well for you.
Yeah, I think that's a big key that so much of this really comes back to is we've lost sight of what our bodies are telling us. we're not in tune with what real hunger feels like. We emotionally eat, but we're not necessarily physically, truly hungry. Or we, like you said, drink water because we've been told we should drink all this water all day long. Or, we have all these practices that we just sort of do either out of habit or because we've been told, but they might not actually be in line with your body or your goals or, what you're working on. And so I think the more we can get back into connection to those real signals and what your body is really telling you it needs, the better off we'll be and much healthier for it as well. I love that.
Definitely.
So if people are interested in learning more about what you do, how to work with you, all the things, where can they find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram under Bliss by Balance. So that's bliss.by.balance. I don't yet have a website, but I'm hoping to soon, and I will, post that on my Instagram page as soon as I do. I am also on Facebook under Bliss by Balance as well. Or you can search for my name, Meghna Mistry, and I've got I post some things on there as well. So yeah, either one of those two.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, we will link up all of your information in the description of this episode so that people can very easily find you and reach out to you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your Ayurvedic pearls of wisdom with us today and telling us a little bit about what that practice is and who it's for and how it's different than other modalities. I think this information is really helpful for a lot of other people to see that there's lots of different ways to accomplish the same goals, and Ayurveda might just be the way for individuals. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And any final words before we wrap up the episode?
No, just thank you so much for having me. And yeah, like Ayurveda is great, and I'm sure there's loads of other great stuff out there. So yeah, just keep looking out for yourselves and yeah, stay happy.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's another way for everyone out there. So if you haven't found the way that works for you, maybe it's Ayurveda, maybe it's something else, but keep looking, keep trying, keep finding out what works for you. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you again on future episodes.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a faithful listener to the podcast. I'd love it if you left me a 5-star review on this podcast so that others can more easily find this valuable information. Did you know I also work one-on-one with clients? I approach solving health challenges like I approached solving crimes, by conducting a thorough investigation into your case. Sadly, hundreds of millions of people in the US have insulin resistance, prediabetes, and diabetes, and the vast majority have no idea. I'm here to fix that. If you struggle with low energy, stubborn weight, hypertension, sleep disturbances, or any other undesired symptoms, let's talk. All you have to do is schedule a free call. The link will be in the show notes. And no, you do not need to live near me.